This is you, refreshing your phone because the page took 3 seconds too long. Now, backtrack. Past your parents, past their parents, keep going. Until you land on a man crouched in dry dirt, wiping sweat with hands that have never known comfort. That guy? That's your ancestor. He has no name, no backup plan, and no idea that you, a distant descendant who gets irritated by buffering videos, even exist. And here's the problem. If that man, or anyone in your bloodline, had one bad season, one bad decision, or just one unlucky day, you wouldn't be here. So let's take a look at how many times Indian history almost quietly erased you from existence. We're ranking 4 different eras that tried, very efficiently, to end your bloodline. From mildly uncomfortable to you don't even make it past childhood levels of bad. 13th to early 16th century. What we casually call the Delhi Sultanate wasn't even one empire. It was 5 different dynasties taking turns at the throne. The Mamluks, Khaljis, Tughlaqs, Saids, and Lodis. 5 dynasties, 5 different ruling families. Same basic strategy, be the last one alive. Not through peaceful elections, mostly through violence, betrayal, and whoever was best at removing the previous guy. Succession wasn't a process, it was a competition, and the prize was surviving long enough to sit on the throne. To manage this constantly shifting empire, a system called the Ikta was used. The land was divided into regions controlled by military commanders, muktis. They collected taxes, funded their armies, and sent the rest to the sultan. In theory, it was efficient. In practice, it worked just well enough to keep the empire running, and just badly enough to ruin your life. At the same time, something interesting was happening. Cultures were mixing. Languages evolved. Early forms of Urdu emerged. Sufism spread across regions. Architecture flourished. Monuments like the Qutub Minar still stand today. So yes, civilization was advancing, just not necessarily in ways that made your personal life easier. Because while culture was growing, so was chaos. There was no fixed rule of succession, no clear next king, just a very simple system. If you were strong enough to take power, you were the sultan. If not, you weren't. And then there were the Mongols. For nearly a century, the Sultanate stood as a buffer against repeated Mongol threats, which means the Northwest wasn't a border, it was a permanent anxiety, a place where peace was temporary and danger was always one bad day away. And just when you thought things couldn't get more unpredictable, you get rulers like Muhammad bin Tughlaq, a man known for ambitious ideas, like moving the entire population of Delhi hundreds of miles to Daulatabad, on foot, across harsh conditions. Thousands died during the process. And then, he changed his mind and moved the capital back. And that's where history stops being interesting and starts being your problem. Not as a warrior, not as a noble. No, you're born a peasant, which means your entire life is basically a long, slow negotiation with hunger that you keep losing. You wake up before sunrise, work land you don't own, grow food you don't get to keep, and then the tax collector shows up. Under rulers like Alauddin Khalji, about half your produce is gone instantly. 50%. Not profit. And just when you think, okay, maybe I can survive on what's left, local intermediaries step in. They take their share too, because of course they do. By the time everyone is done taking from you, what's left is just enough to keep you alive, which is perfect, because dead peasants don't pay taxes.
The Mughal Empire was basically the Delhi Sultanate's high-budget sequel, with a much more efficient way of making sure you stayed poor. It started with Babur, who decided the place looked better under his management. Then it became a 300-year game of musical thrones, where every time an emperor got a cough, his son started a massive civil war. Under the Zopt system, they measured every inch of your land just to accurately take half of everything you grew. Every official had a rank, and their only job was to provide horses to the emperor while squeezing you for operating costs. If the emperor wanted a marble monument, your ancestor was press-ganged into forced labor while his own farm rotted. By the later years, the empire was a snake eating its own tail.
So, what was the absolute worst draw in the Mughal lottery of birth? You might think it's the peasant, but honestly, it gets worse. Meet the halal core. In an empire obsessed with Persian etiquette and ritual purity, your job was cleaning dry latrines by hand. You weren't just poor, you were socially invisible and ritually unclean.
If the Sultanate was a street fight and the Mughals were a corporate skyscraper, the British Raj was a cold industrial meat grinder. This wasn't about shiny tombs or individual warlords anymore. This was the era of the spreadsheet. The British didn't just rule India. They turned the entire subcontinent into a massive extraction engine designed to power a distant island. They didn't care about your culture or your kings. They cared about the math of misery. Imagine being a farmer forced to grow opium and indigo while your family is literally starving. To fund a tea habit for someone in London who doesn't even know you exist.
Ancient India. This is survival without the systems. Before the empires, before the spreadsheets, there was just you and a very angry environment. You wake up and your entire future depends on things you cannot control. Weather, health, chance. You don't have a system. You are the system. If you fail, there is no backup, no recovery, no retry, just done. Life expectancy was basically try not to get a scratch. No modern healthcare means a stubbed toe could be a death sentence, and a fever was just the universe's way of saying, thanks for playing.